So, as I'm sure many of you know, some historic flooding has been happening down in Texas. Um, and it's been incredibly destructive. Over 100 people have died. People, I believe, are still missing. And it is like a once in a century kind of flood. The Guardian put together this piece with pictures just kind of demonstrating the height of water in some of these locations. Like entire communities just kind of gone. People coming together. But like it really demonstrates the might of this flooding. And a lot of people did not wind up okay from this, you know? Um Notably, a children's camp was hit by the flooding. Yeah, actually, here's the flood gauge here. Just rushing water at 1 to 2 feet. People, in some places, people lost everything because this was a once like in a century type flood. Um, a lot of people who were affected don't have flood insurance, so they just have nothing. They have nothing. You know, it's really, really devastating. But also, there have been stories coming out of hope. Like, oh, look, they found 2 girls alive. And no, people are just peddling a lot of misinformation about this. People are just, things are so awful that people really want there to be like good news, good information out there, feel good stories in the middle of this, but there isn't any. You know, it's kind of worse actually that people are just lying. And here's a good time lapse. Thank you for this, Akumi. Let's turn off that music. But look at that. It absolutely devastating. And I wanted to, over 100 people have died. The response has been lackluster to say the least. And some important knowledge to know about, hey, why did so many people get hit by this? Shouldn't there be like a warning system of some kind when there's enough rainfall to make an event like this more likely? And the answer to that is yes. There is traditionally a system that would in fact alert people to to the fact that this would happen. However, it relies on funding from the federal government, funding that was cut by Elon Musk and Donald Trump. So, yeah.
Out with the white names.
Oh, Salmon Moose, thank you for gifting Connor K a sub. That's very, very kind of you. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. Texas officials and it's not just incompetence in the Trump administration, by the way. It's also incompetence at the local level by Republicans in Texas. Texas officials shot down siren flood alert, complaining that it might go off in the middle of the night. In 2016, local leaders debated a flood warning system designed to alert residents and out-of-town visitors to rising water, according to the Houston Chronicle. Despite an engineering study recommending nearly $1 million in upgrades, including public sirens, the project was never funded, partly due to concerns that sirens might disturb residents while they slept, which is kind of the point of a siren. The siren is there to alert you that there is something you should be awake to account for. If you're in the middle of the night and you are in the path of an oncoming flood, I think you might want to wake up. Actually, I think you might want that inconvenience of waking up in the middle of the night so you can save yourself and your family. Then Commissioner H.A. Buster Baldwin, who died in 2022, dismissed the plan as excessive and joked that midnight sirens would drive him to drink. The thought of our beautiful Kerr County having these damn sirens going off in the middle of the night, I'm going to have to start drinking again to put up with y'all, Baldwin reportedly said in 2016, which, like, why would the sirens be going off in the middle of the night unless there was a flood coming? At the time, he questioned whether the alerts would only benefit crazy people from Houston who built too close to the water. And it turns out in Texas, if you live in a flood zone that is a once in 100 years flood zone, it's a little cheaper. And some of the buildings that were built in that flood zone and discovered later on that they had built in that flood zone, well, they also decided not to move their buildings because that would be too expensive. One example of this, by the way, is the children's summer camp. Many of you may have heard by now that there was a children's summer camp that was hit very hard by these floodwaters, and many children died as a result of that. And part of that was preventable. Like that was preventable. Because the person who owns the camp knew that those cabins were in the flood zone. And years prior had the funding to move those buildings out of the flood zone and didn't. And as a result, children are now dead. Again, this is why you don't want Republicans running your even your local government. Like, a Republican will just be like, flooding? Who needs a siren for flooding? It'll wake you up in the middle of the night. Ho, ho, ho. And then, like, 10 years later, 100 children die. You know? Oh, yeah, a lot of the people in these areas voted Republican. That's how these areas are Republican in the first place. But, you know, I think a lot of the blame also falls on the Trump administration. Again, because they cut thousands of people whose job it was to, like, talk about the weather, predict the weather, you know, issue different warnings. It's so frustrating. Baldweezy 365, newly registered Dem here, woke up people. I'll be honest, as a white guy, I felt hated by Dems and still do, to be frank. There's a lot we can improve on, but I'm happy to have woken up. Republican from 2016 to 2018, then independent from 2018 to 2025 for context. But why did they spend the funding on police force BS as opposed to flood prevention measures? Because I'm going to be honest here, because I think there are a lot of people who look at, like, shiny new police equipment and they say, ooh, that's cool. Like, frankly, I think that's a large part of it, right? Like, oh God, can I find it really quick? No, I can't. There's a video of, like, a small town police department putting out, like, look, we just got an armored vehicle, and, like, they put, like, kind of shitty rock music over it, and it's, like, going over little speed bumps and stuff, and they think it looks badass, right? And I think that on, like, kind of like a instinctual level for a lot of Republicans, they look at that and they're like, that does look badass. And they value the looking of badassness more than the actual functional utility of having early warning for floods. You know, because a flood, that's something that might happen, you know, in 100 years. We don't got to worry about that. Let's get a badass cop car, though. That'll be cool. Like, I genuinely think for a lot of Republican dudes, like, that's what it boils down to. God, I'm not going to find it. I really wanted to. It was very funny. So, of course, a lot of the blame for this lies at the feet of the Trump administration, right? And, you know, he's been cutting things left and right. You know, the cuts are going to hit now Medicare, Medicaid, basically anything that helps us on a day-to-day basis. Oh, by the way, and this is just kind of an early shout out, but in a couple weeks, the Navy is going to stop sharing its, like, atmospheric data with weather stations across the country. And that is going to be devastating. It is basically going to cripple our ability to detect hurricanes and such. It's going to be an absolutely colossal loss to our ability to forecast catastrophic storms forming off the coast. So That's a whole thing. Yeah, no, this is exactly what I was talking about, arachnomancy. This is exactly what I was talking about. The camp cabins are literally in one of the biggest flood zones. Here, yeah. This is exactly what I was talking about. You can literally see a bunch of them were built directly inside the flood zone, and then almost all the rest of the buildings are built in like the expanded flood zone. I can't. It makes me so mad. Especially like I used to be a camp counselor, and like I cared about my kids so much. Why are they doing that? Because it's cheaper. It's cheaper to build in a flood zone. You know, if you're only thinking short term. Yeah, Dick Eastland, the co-owner and executive director of Camp Mystic, who died in last week's flooding, had worked to approve that system, saying it would give people along the river more time to react to a flood event. The river is beautiful, but you have to respect it, Mr. Eastland told the Austin American Statesman in 1990. And it's like, you said that, and then you built almost your entire camp in one of the primary flood zones. Mr. Eastland seemed to be extremely cautious when it came to flooding. Yeah, seeming to be and actually being are very different. In 2016, at the camp's 90th anniversary event, she recalled asking Mr. Eastland about flood risks. He told her that the dam was inspected every summer, she recalled, and gave the impression that he never imagined a disaster of the kind that developed last week. He didn't feel that there was any way that camp could flood like this, she said, despite the fact that literally in a floodway. But okay. Cool. Makes me so fucking mad. 6 years ago, when Camp Mystic pursued a $5 million construction project to overhaul and expand its private, for-profit Christian camp, no effort was made to relocate the most at-risk cabins away from the river. Instead, local officials authorized the construction of new cabins in another part of the camp, including some that also lie in a designated flood risk area. The older ones along the river remained in use, and those older ones along the river are where the youngest children were. They had $5 million to invest in this camp, and they spent none of it on making the kids safer from a known threat. It's infuriating. Like it's just beyond infuriating. Speaking of, let's take a look here at Michael Knowles, a man known for his good takes, if by good takes you mean being wrong about everything. Let's take a look at what he thinks about the Texas flooding situation. I'm sure it's very even-handed and not at all unhinged.
Before we get to any of the big political stories, I do have to get to these horrific storms in Texas.
Yeah, which definitely not a big political story. There's no politics when it comes to storms or storm damage prevention or funding for cleanup or anything else along those lines. Nothing political at all. Nothing to see here. It's just Mother Nature, God's vengeance. Ha ha.
Obviously, I was out of the country, and I was barely checking my phone. I didn't really want to see all the political news. I'll catch up on it later. But then you saw this horrific storm, massive floods, 82 people confirmed dead so far. That number is almost certainly going to rise. I think there are 40 plus people still confirmed missing. That includes dozens of girls from a Christian summer camp. I mean, just absolutely horrific. So we all pray for everyone and for the rescue efforts and all the rest, for the families, for the dead.
What, Michael, what was that face?
Efforts and all the rest, for the families, for the dead.
I mean, at least pretend you give a shit about saying you want to pray for the families. Like, at least pretend, man. Jesus.
One thing we don't do is react in the way that some really prominent people on the left have been reacting, which was totally predictable, but it's repulsive and nauseating
Oh, so you're saying that Democrats or left-leaning folks reacting angrily is predictable, but weather and weather patterns aren't. That's interesting. We'll see if that holds up.
And it gets to a real problem at the heart of liberalism. I'll just use one example.
Yeah, lay it on us.
This guy, Kyle Kulinski, who is a fairly well-known internet person on the left.
Okay, I didn't know Kyle Kulinski was going to be involved in this.
He's been around for a while. He writes, with the flooding in Texas and all of those precious little girls dying. Look at this, what a mocking phrase, all these precious little girls dying.
What are you talking about? It's so mocking to talk about children being precious. What the fuck are you on about, man?
It's important to remember this was 100% preventable.
Yes.
Elon and Trump slashed the National Weather Service and massively reduced the number of weather balloons in the country, destroying our ability to accurately forecast severe weather events. I've personally experienced forecasts being way off multiple times already. They have blood on their hands and they should be arrested for the deaths of those little girls. Okay.
Yes.
So none of this is true.
No, it is absolutely true.
Really. This was not 100% preventable. We'll get to that in 1 second. Elon and Trump.
No, what was preventable was, having early warning systems funded. What was preventable was having better forecasting to alert people sooner that this event was on its way. Like, who cut these systems? It's not difficult to find. The lasting threat of Trump's cuts to NOAA and NWS on American communities. Let's just take a look, shall we? Let's see. Let's see. The National Weather Service, in particular, has lost close to 600 staff at a time when 40% of the National Weather Forecast offices are facing significant staff vacancies. Specifically for the Austin, San Antonio Forecasting Office, which covers areas affected by the Texas floods, the Trump administration's recent DOGE layoffs included a warning coordination meteorologist position that plays a critical role in communication coordination between forecasters, emergency managers, and the public. These cuts to NOAA and NWS programs, staff, and data are making communities more vulnerable to storms like the one that hit Kerr County, Texas. It's not even subtle. The 2026 budget appears to actively be working to eliminate the Office of Oceanic and Atmospheric Research, along with all NOAA weather laboratories and cooperative institutes and laboratories, which provide weather forecasting data and research from 80 universities and work to improve NOAA's warning and forecasting capabilities. Like, this isn't like, there's really no connection if you think about it. Like, no, this is like you literally fired the people who would have been in charge of determining the risk to these areas. And you fired the people in charge of communicating that risk to local officials. You fired every single part of the chain that would have alerted people that this type of flooding was imminent and that they should get to safety. And like, if just one more part of that chain had been in place, it is possible that those little girls wouldn't have died in that camp. It's possible that the people who died in this flooding would have gotten to safety, would have gotten to higher ground. The damage would have still been immense, but the people would still be alive. This is not... this isn't even like that big of like a logical chain to follow. If you are aware that a natural disaster is barreling down on your location, you're more likely to get to safety. I think even the biggest dumbass can understand that.
Flashing the National Weather Service is
Well, I stand corrected.
Schellenberg points out the National Weather Service got this right. The issue is not the National Weather Service. There do seem to have been errors in sending out alarms.
Yeah, which is part of what they help do
at the state level, but there's no...
They communicate to state officials.
No evidence that the National Weather Service failed at all. There's no evidence that just now and in the first year.
Like, I'm sorry, it's crazy to me that to be like, well, the National Weather Service knew that this was happening, but then, you know, like it just didn't get out beyond that. It's like, well, the entire purpose of the National Weather Service getting that information is to disseminate that information to the people who need to know it. It doesn't, like, it does us no good if they're just collecting the information and no one knows about it. Michael, like, that should be obvious.
Of the second Trump term, finally, meteorologists get forecasts wrong. Obviously, that's happened so frequently that it's been a punchline for as long as there have been meteorologists. They have blood on their hands. Listen to the sanctimony, the self-righteousness from this guy, Kyle Kulinski. 100% preventable.
You literally clothe yourself in God on every single one of your shows, Michael Knowles. I don't want to hear you talking about how someone else is sanctimonious. Pompous ass.
Now, we know this isn't true. We know that this can't be attributable to any supposed cuts made under the second Trump term because of Hurricane Harvey. So the confirmed death toll so far in
What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Oh my God.
In this awful storm is 82. Hurricane Harvey killed at least 68 in 2017, many years before the supposed.
Yeah, maybe there's a difference between these two things, Michael. Like, maybe one might want to look more at different things. Hey, guess what? Did you guys know that more people died in Pompeii? Checkmate. There wasn't even a National Weather Service back then to tell people that the volcano was erupting. More people died in Pompeii. Yeah, checkmate. Or, you know, like it's like fewer people died of Typhoon Terry over in Malaysia. See, checkmate. Like, it doesn't. The issue isn't did another natural disaster kill more or less people. That's irrelevant. What is relevant is what led to the communication breakdown in this particular instance that led to over 100 people dying. That's important. That's important. And what happened here when you dig into the story is shocking. And we are going to dig into the story after we work through this clip of Michael Knowles. But just understand that, like, the deaths in this case were preventable with better early warning detection and communication. Things that the National Weather Service has historically done, but they can't right now because the people responsible for doing those jobs were fired by the Trump administration.
Elon Trump cuts to the National Weather Service. What would the left, what would Kyle Kulinski blame that on? Before that, let's go back a little further. Tropical Storm Allison killed 55 people in, what was it? That was 2001, I think, right? Well, long before anyone had really considered President Trump a serious presidential candidate. Well, let's go back a little further than that, because, you know, the other thing that people are going to blame this on is climate change, global warming, whatever. How about the Galveston hurricane, where the storm surges and the floods killed between 6,000 and 12,000 people in 1900, long before any global warming, climate.
Yeah, I wonder if there are any other factors that contributed to more people dying 125 years ago. I wonder if maybe, like, technological innovations have been made that make buildings safer, that make them more resilient in the face of natural disasters. You know, did you know that there used to be a time when, like, earthquakes would regularly just, like, demolish like half of the cities on the West Coast? And then guess what? We developed technologies, and now that doesn't happen nearly as much. Like, there are other factors at play here, but the main factor at play in this flooding thing in Texas is cuts to the jobs that are dedicated to keeping people safe from the weather.
Change long before any of the things, long before Trump, but long before any of the things that the left is going to blame this natural disaster on. A reaction like Kyle Kulinski's, and I don't mean to just single him out. There have been plenty of people on the left who have reacted this way. This reaction entails
also, again, climate change makes it more and more likely as things get hotter and hotter that these storms get bigger and bigger. That's just it.
A lot of vice. You have to have a lot of personal vice and sin to have this reaction. But ultimately, ideologically, it's about a denial of original sin. That's really what.
Okay. We're back to just claiming God is sending natural disasters to punish sinners. Okay. Tell us more.
This is about. The tragedy has to be preventable. Because the world can't be fallen, because there can't be any such thing as original sin, because there can't be any limits on human potential. We must be able to control everything. We must be able to prevent every bad thing. We must be able to perfect society. It must be true. That is the premise of liberalism.
No. If you have people whose job it is to communicate when there is a natural disaster about to happen, on its way to a given area, and they communicate that to people so that they can get out of said area, and then you fire those people, you're gonna have more innocent folks dying as a result of that. It's not, and like, again, remember how he called Kyle Kulinski like sanctimonious? And now he's talking about like you're all denying original sin and the fallenness of the world. Like, no, that actually has nothing to do with the argument. The argument is just, hey, if you have an early warning system in place and people who make up that early warning system, and then a bunch of people die because they were caught unaware by the thing that they typically would have been made aware of by the early warning system, then that's a problem with whoever in the leadership gutted the early warning system. That's why we're pointing fingers at the Trump administration, because they're the ones responsible for firing the people who would have been in charge of letting us know about the natural disaster.
But it's not true, because it's a fallen world. And you couldn't have.
I love that Michael Knowles, in the face of like tragedy, is like, could we have done things better? No, we live in a fallen world. How dare you even suggest that we could possibly create a system that would minimize death and suffering? You fools, you buffoons. Like, it doesn't make sense. And honestly, he should be laughed out of any room he's in for the rest of his life for making this argument.
Prevented any of these things. Not in 1900, not in 2001, not just this past week. Bad things just happen sometimes. And bad things happen to good people. That's called theodicy.
Bad things do happen to good people. That is true.
Damn Rocket Money didn't cancel this.
I Can't Video Game, thank you for resubscribing. Appreciate you. But again, his literal argument is there's no possible way to like keep people safe. No policy can keep you safe, says conservative who's been talking about how policies need to keep us safe every single show he's done for the last 10 years.
And the great thinkers have dealt with this problem for millennia. But
the problem of early flood warning systems? I don't think so.
Modern liberals in particular, modern people generally, but modern liberals in particular, cannot deal with that because there cannot be such a thing as original sin. Bad things can't just happen. We must be able to.
I feel like bad things can just happen. And frankly, I think people understand that, especially people who aren't Christian can understand that bad things can in fact just happen. Like that's, yeah, we live in a world where bad things can just randomly happen. You know, I was thinking about this the other day. There was a spider that startled me, and I smashed it on the wall. I was moving boxes, and it just got scared and ran out. And I smashed it on reflex, and there was a part of me that just felt so guilty for doing that, because I imagined the spider's perspective, that it was just minding its own business, and then all of a sudden its existence, faster than it can possibly even comprehend, came to an end. And to that spider, like, bad things happen for no reason, because that's that can happen in life. Bad things can just happen. But what Michael Knowles is saying is not just that bad things can happen. He's also trying to say that people on the left don't recognize that bad things can just happen, which is just patently false. But he's trying to do that in what I think is a particularly grotesque way, which is by effectively trying to let everyone off the hook could have done better and knew they should have been doing better because we previously had an early warning system that would have worked. Michael Knowles is trying to let people responsible for this mass death event off the hook. If you're a conservative, just understand, people like Michael Knowles would happily argue that, like, if you got murdered, that, well, what do you want to have happen? You know, they would just happily advocate, like, oh, you died as a result of negligence from a member of the Trump administration. Nothing wrong with that. Bad things just happen.
Stop it. We are human beings. We have the potential to totally control the world. We can make ourselves gods. That's the theory, and it's false. I remember after that awful shooting at.
I love that he's like, oh, you want to have an early warning system that functions when it comes to flooding? You moron, you imbecile, you want to be a god. And it's like, no, we have technology that allows us to do this. It's a matter of hiring someone trained for the position. That's it.
A Covenant School here in Nashville, when the trans identifying person shot up the little kids at the Christian school. There was another one of these guys, like another Kyle Kulinski, David Pakman. He's another one of these liberal internet guys who doesn't make himself out to be some radical or some fringe person, makes himself out to be a mainstream person. And he came out, he tweeted out, he said, it's so strange that there was a shooting at a Christian school because they always pray. Maybe those little kids should have prayed harder and they wouldn't have been killed. That was his reaction of a guy who considers himself a mainstream leftist. And
I mean, maybe if conservatives ever offered a solution to mass shootings that wasn't just thoughts and prayers, or teachers should have guns around their students, you know, like, I don't know. I don't think it's an unfair response to, you know, a very long series and strains of mass shootings in schools that have taken place with people performatively doing the thoughts and prayers thing and no action actually being taken to address the mass shootings.
There was the same kind of sanctimony. The same.
Dog, you just went on a rant about how liberals think they're gods because we want to have weather forecasting that works. Don't fucking talk about sanctimony here for other people. Like, damn, dude. Do you have zero self-awareness?
Bile in the reaction. But also,
you literally opened this segment, by the way, offering thoughts and prayers while, like, rolling your eyes, half-heartedly, like, offering thoughts and prayers for the victims. And, like, you went on to say none of the people who were in positions of leadership in their communities or in our government full of Republican elected officials, they didn't do anything wrong. No, you're basically just, again, offering thoughts and prayers with no actual constructive suggestion on how to improve this or prevent this in the future. It's crazy. T-, thank you for gifting a sub to Minty Treasure.
So the same sanctimony, as if to just blame Republicans or something.
Republicans currently have a majority in Congress and the presidency. They control the budget for these national agencies. The budget that got cut. They put people in charge of these different agencies and had them gut the agencies, firing hundreds, in some cases thousands of workers whose job it would have been to communicate to people on the ground, to get them evacuated.
It couldn't just be that bad things happen sometimes. But of course you ask all of.
No, of course bad things happen sometimes, but also part of having a functional government is being prepared for those bad things. You know, like, for example, America has a standing military, right? We have a standing military because sometimes bad things happen, right? Sometimes, like, it turns out that standing military needs to become active and do something. A lot of other countries have standing militaries as well for the similar reason.
People die all the time, that's why we should never do anything about anything. Don't you know about my religion's concept of original sin?
It really is. It really is a situation where, like, you know, people die of heart attacks all the time. Why on earth would you do any kind of preventative medication or change of lifestyle to put off that heart attack? Don't you know of original sin? We live in a fallen world. That heart attack can happen anytime. Nothing you can do about it. You went to go see Dave down by the hardware store, and he's not a doctor, but, you know, like, he told you not to go to the doctor because he knows what's best for you.
These people. You ask David Packman at the shooting in Nashville, you say, well, what would you have done to prevent this? Maybe they would say gun control. We would pass a gun control law. There's not one gun control law been proposed in the past 3 decades that would have stopped any of these shootings. You might say prevent trans-identifying people from getting guns. He almost certainly wouldn't agree with that. You ask Kyle Kulinski or these libs, you say, what would you have done to prevent the flood? I would have funded the National Weather Service. There was no problem with the National Weather Service. Well, I would have had more carbon tax credits. I would have had more electric vehicles. You would have had what? You would have had what? Nothing.
You would have had the people who were fired, whose job it is to communicate with local and state officials and initiate early warning procedures for the affected areas. You would have mobilized them and put them to work to make known the threat. You would have gotten FEMA out there to prep for disaster relief because you know what's coming. You would have had teams on the ground ready to rescue people because you know what is coming. It's like you're acting like it's impossible to have been prepared for this, but that's exactly what an early warning system allows you to do. It allows you to get prepared for that.
That you've proposed will stop natural disasters. Wouldn't have stopped Hurricane Harvey, wouldn't have stopped Tropical Storm Allison, wouldn't have stopped the Galveston hurricane.
You know, it's crazy to me that, like, earlier he threw out there, like, the hurricane that happened in 1900 and how many more people died in 1900. And part of the reason why so many more people died in 1900 is because they didn't have functional early warning systems or functional, material ways of rescuing people in the ways we have today. We have so much more when it comes to resources, so much more when it comes to information, so much more when it comes to information dissemination. And that's how we're able to lower the death toll in these natural disasters, even as they get more intense and bigger in scope and scale. Michael's argument here is literally, you can't make anything better. Just accept your fate. You're going to die because you're a sinner. That's it. That's his only argument.
It wouldn't have stopped any. There has been flooding. There have been natural disasters. There has been evil and sin and death in the world since just almost the beginning.
You know, okay, let's engage Michael on his own turf here. Hey, do you guys remember one of the first guys who got who was the beneficiary of an early warning system for a natural disaster? Do any of you guys remember the old tale? There's a little guy named Noah, right? And God, with his superior early warning system, was able to let him know that there was a gigantic flood coming. And Noah was able to build a goddamn boat to keep himself and his family safe. Wow, that's crazy. It's almost like having an early warning system that functions, benefits people, and allows them to save their own lives. It's so fucking awful. And it's so clear he has nothing, by the way. He's got absolutely nothing. Michael Knowles is just running on fumes for this segment because he's basically just like, what do you want him to do? What do you want? What do you want them to do? And I want them to do things that will result in fewer people dying. Yeah. I want maybe the state of Texas to enforce their regulations so that people aren't building summer camps in flood zones because it's cheaper. You know? I don't know, just a couple ideas. Maybe the people who were fired from the National Weather Service and NOAA should be rehired so that we can continue to have functional early warning systems that allow people to get to safety. Maybe we should continue sharing Navy weather data with the rest of the country so that we continue to have an early warning system that functions. Just spitballing some ideas here. Man would fail at being a hat rack? Absolutely.
Almost. Since we got booted out of the garden. And there are things we can do, obviously, to protect ourselves, to...
Then what was the entire point of everything you just said? If there are things we can do to protect ourselves as a society and as individuals, then what the fuck was this entire segment about, other than trying to say these people don't have a point, except that their point was there are things we can obviously do to protect ourselves and our communities, which there are. One of the biggest is making sure the people who forecast and also communicate natural disasters retain their jobs and continue to have the ability to communicate with us when threats arise. God.
To try to cope and to comfort people who deal with the suffering that life entails. But this ain't it. And what it comes down to is a fundamental error in the modern...
Like Michael Knowles will happily advocate for like the Second Amendment, your Second Amendment right to carry like a handgun to protect yourself, you know, but he won't advocate for like funding for a federal government agency to be able to protect the people that government represents from natural disasters. It doesn't make sense. It's completely incoherent.
Ideology. Liberalism, most notably, the hubris, the pride to say we can prevent evil, we can just
wait,
totally stop it. It'll never seep in. We can
in fact defeat evil. We can't 100% defeat it, but we can in fact improve things. You know, there was a time when people were dying left and right of smallpox. And guess what? We figured out a way to stop that. We figured out a way to inoculate people against smallpox so that people would never die from smallpox again. We figured that out. We were able to eliminate human suffering. It's now absolutely needless to suffer from smallpox as a result of our ability to overcome that challenge. We also have the ability to overcome the challenges posed by flooding and natural disasters, specifically because we developed technology that allows us to understand what areas are going to be affected by those natural disasters. But Michael Knowles is directly opposed to those systems and technologies, like clearly. And all I can really come to the conclusion about all that I can really say about that is that it really seems like Michael Knowles is just saying that if you are in a flood zone, if you are in an area that gets hit by hurricanes or tornadoes or earthquakes, you should just die. Like, that's kind of what it seems like he's saying to me. That you should just lay down and die because we live in a fallen world of sin. Just lay down and die.
We can save the world. That's the error. And these people certainly can't, and none of us can. There's one person who can say
this. By the way, is one of the reasons why a certain segment of Christianity falls into kind of this death cult mentality, where it's just kind of like the world's fallen, nothing good can happen in it, you can't improve things, so people should just suffer and die. Like, there is a certain element within Christianity that kind of like leans towards that end of the spectrum.
Save the world, and he has. I'll move on, but just one additional terrible reaction to these tragedies. You see this one all over TikTok. People who almost come.
I can't. We're now beyond his storm segment. He's going into TikTok reacts. But I do want to remind you all of a very famous clip of Michael
Sometimes
Knowles.
people die, it just happens. Also check out this box of cigars. Alright, you all have a good night, Riverboat Jack peeps.
See ya, it's me, Bingo. Thank you for the $5 super chat. And here is ultimately what Michael Knowles believes should apply to not just the elderly, but to all of us.
Sometimes I wish the elderly would just die.
You know, like that's just the sociopathic character he played in his acting reel is just him. It's just how he actually thinks about actual people, you know? Like, it's not...
Sometimes I wish the elderly would just die.
Just monstrous. But also, we're not done. Because the story actually continues. This Michael Knowles clip that we just went over came out 4 days ago. And some very interesting events have transpired since then that add to the story of Texas flooding. Now, let's start with this, which is maybe one of the most incredible moments I've ever seen in politics. I'll just let it play.
Here with CBS News Texas, several families we've heard from are obviously upset because they say that those warnings, those alerts didn't go out in time, and they also say that people could have been saved. What do you say to those families?
Well, I think everyone did an incredible job under the circumstances. This was, I guess Christie said, a 1 in 500, 1 in 1,000 years. And I just have admiration for the job that everybody did. There was just admiration. The only a bad person would ask a question like that, to be honest with you. I don't know who you are, but only a very evil person would ask a question like that. I think this has been heroism. This has been incredible, really, the job you've all done. It's easy to sit back and say, oh, what could have happened here or there, you know. Maybe we could have done something differently. This was a thing that has never happened before.
So that is the president of the United States saying anyone who thinks that the government should have been more on the ball when it came to its early alert system, something that has functioned in the past but ceased to function under Donald Trump following his cuts. Anyone who asks about that, asks about the system of early notice for natural disasters, why it failed. Anyone who asks about that is evil. Anyone who is concerned about that is evil. According to the President of the United States, this is a man who fucking despises you. If you are a conservative in Texas, if you're a conservative in anywhere in rural America, this man hates you. This man would would just like completely accept and be okay with your death and just say like, actually people are evil for caring about the fact that, you know, you died. Like he could point a gun at you, kill you, and then call the people who are concerned about that evil. It's genuinely shocking to me in a way that like I find difficult to put into words. Following a tragedy that's killed over 100 people, many of whom are children. Like he's literally talking to the families of people who have lost loved ones, the families of people who have lost children, and saying you're evil for even questioning the fact that I cut our early alert system. You're evil for questioning that. When we talk about like the fascism around Donald Trump being a death cult, this is what we mean. When we talk about the fact that like they are okay throwing people into, you know, proverbial meat grinders for the service of the state, this is what we mean. You cut the systems people rely on to live. And then when they die, you just say, oh, that's just how things should be. Look at all the heroism on display here. It's truly evil stuff. And now we get to, again, keep in mind, that's Donald Trump talking about how anyone who questions the response to this is evil. Here's a piece from the New York Times that was published earlier today. FEMA didn't answer thousands of calls from flood survivors, document shows. 2 days after deadly Texas floods, the agency struggled to answer calls from survivors because of call center contracts that weren't extended. Now, that sounds weirdly bureaucratic, so I'm going to break this down a little bit because this story is genuinely insane, okay? It's genuinely insane and infuriating in a way that I struggle to find words for. Okay? So basically what happened? The FEMA laid off a bunch of contractors on July 5th because they had contracts that expired and weren't extended. The reason these contracts weren't extended is because Kristi Noem, the head of the Homeland Security, had instituted a new rule saying that any expenses above $100,000 needed to be approved by her personally. And she didn't get around to re-upping those contracts until several days later. So basically, you have a period of the first day, FEMA answered calls, but that was the last day. The first day of the flooding, FEMA answered calls. That's the last day those call centers were contracted for. The next day, they didn't have call contract support. They didn't have call centers to take the calls. Okay, and it's just the amount of fumbling here is truly next level. Okay, and the government is just lying. The government is just lying, right? So a spokesperson for the Department of Homeland Security who asked for anonymity wrote, quote, "When a natural disaster strikes, phone calls surge and wait times can subsequently increase. Despite this expected influx, FEMA's disaster call center responded to every caller swiftly and efficiently, ensuring no one was left without assistance." And that is what we call in the biz a lie. So the New York Times actually got a hold of the number of calls each day the flooding took place, right? So this is the general system that is in place. After floods, hurricanes, and other disasters, survivors can call FEMA. And when they call, they can apply for financial assistance that helps them get through and find stability and such. People who lose homes can apply for a one-time payment to help in the interim period while they find some stability or clean up their homes, etc. Get their scavenge their supplies. So on July 5th, floodwaters starting to recede. FEMA got 3,027 calls from disaster survivors, and they answered 3,018, 99.7%. That's pretty good. Those calls were overwhelmingly answered by contractors from 4 different call center companies. However, that evening, the contracts expired, and Kristi Noem was nowhere to be found. The next day, when they had no call centers contracted at this point, FEMA received 2,363 calls, and they only answered 846, 35.8%. The next day, on July 7th, the agency got 16,419 calls, and they answered only 2,613, only 15.9%. Within FEMA, officials could not understand why Kristi Noem wasn't re-upping these contracts. In the documents, there is an email, right, where they say, quote, "We still do not have a decision, waiver, or signature from the Department of Homeland Security Secretary." That's on July 8th, responding to less than half of these calls. Somebody made a visual representation just to give you an idea, and I think it's useful as a shorthand here. You can literally see the drop-off in answered calls. It's nuts. So not only are the cuts to our National Weather Service resulting in loss of life that could have been prevented, but also in the aftermath of the storm, the federal government that would traditionally provide support is nowhere to be found and in no rush to help people. Truly, truly unhinged. That graphic, by the way, made by Kara Jackson, over on Blue Sky. Just gonna link that in chat for you guys. It's just horrendous. And here, I just want to again, when we look at Michael Knowles and he's offering only thoughts and prayers, let's look at someone with significantly more power in this country than Michael Knowles. Let's take a look at the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson.
State and federal resources have just poured into that area. Is there anything more that can be done congressionally, legislatively to help these folks?
In a moment like this, we feel just as helpless as everyone else does. I've talked to my colleagues there in Texas, Chip Roy and August Pfluger, whose families, that's Chip's district. August's daughters were at the camp. We also had Betty Carter of Georgia, had grandchildren there. It touches so many families, and all we know to do at this moment is pray. Every available resource has been deployed. The president, of course, is dialed in and watching this develop moment by moment as we are, and we'll handle supplemental funding requests as they come in, but right now they're still trying to do rescue and recovery, and our hearts go out to all of them.
State and federal.
They cut this. They cut this. They cut these weather services in the budget bill that he just voted on and pushed through and touted as a triumph. They further cut our weather services. I really want to emphasize here, and I said this on Blue Sky, and I'm going to say it again here, but like, there have been moments in world history where if a civil servant had failed to the degree the Republican Party has failed when it comes to natural disaster response and preparedness, there is a tradition of falling on one's own sword in order to atone for the depth of that failure to the people you are responsible to the people you are elected to represent. And like, we're living through a time period where like, I don't know, like 90% of Republicans are just going, oh, what can you do? People be dying. And that's just not good enough. If you're in a position of leadership, that is just not good enough at all. These people do not take responsibility for the fact that they are killing Americans. That is a direct result of cutting our weather forecasting, of firing the people who are in charge of communicating severe weather issues and potential fallout to state and local authorities. It is a direct result of underfunding and or cutting local response systems like sirens. It is a direct result of systematic cuts and shortfalls and budgetary failures pushed along by conservatives as a result of constant budget cuts so that they can give the richest among us a bigger and bigger share of the pie, while the public services that are supposed to keep all of us safe languish and die. That's where we are in America. And all the while, Republicans can only offer thoughts and prayers. The biggest thing they're expanding under Donald Trump is the deployment of thoughts and prayers as a way of abdicating their responsibility as leaders. Head of local weather warnings takes early retirement as NOAA cuts continue. Yep. Paul Ura, the warning coordination meteorologist at the National Weather Service Austin San Antonio office, has announced that he's taken the early retirement offer as part of NOAA's recent cuts to personnel and budget. He has 32 years of experience, spending more than half of his career at the NWS Austin San Antonio office. In the process, he gained tremendous experience understanding local weather patterns while ensuring timely warnings get disseminated to the public in a multitude of ways. The warning coordination meteorologist is a senior role at the local NWS office, according to NOAA. The WCM coordinates the warning function of the office with the outside world. This would include heading the Skywarn program, conducting spotter training, and being a voice to the local media for the office.
I do care about this stuff, and worry about it. And I do indeed identify as evil.
I mean, yeah, the cuts to this are fucking evil. Like, I don't know how you can, hey, let's cut the jobs of the people who keep us safe from, like, I don't know, the massive water storms that destroy us routinely every year. Let's fire those people. That's like firing a Gundam pilot in the middle of I don't know. That analogy fell apart. That's like firing one of the Pacific Rim pilots in the middle of Pacific Rim. There we go. Nailed it. I was about to say it's like firing a Gundam pilot in the middle of Gundam, but that wouldn't have made sense. There we go. The importance of experience in the WCM role cannot be overstated. Ensuring ample and timely warning to Central Texas counties covered by the NWS Austin and San Antonio is among the chief responsibilities. And URA's final date of employment is April 30th, just before severe weather season in Central Texas typically peaks in the month of May. Science Operations Officer also retiring. Nice. The office is already short 2 meteorologist positions currently listed as vacant. Positions of lead meteorologist and meteorologist remain open. And they also have a vacant electronics technician position. So I genuinely don't know who's working at that office. But this is what Republican administrations do. They cut and they cut and they cut to the bone. Until suddenly people start dying, and then they keep cutting anyway because they don't give a fuck about you or me. All they give a fuck about is that sweet, sweet money and those sweet, sweet billionaires that put money in their pockets too.
Sometimes I wish the elderly would just die.
That is the Republican ethos in a nutshell. It's so infuriating. It's so infuriating.
Riverboat deck is going to town. All the viewers gather around. Twitch and YouTube is where she streams. All that content is bursting the seams. Politics, dating, plenty more. Her sense of fashion you'll adore. So grab your stuff and hop aboard.